The pencil trembled in Commander Richard O'Kane's hand as he marked the position on the chart spread before him in USS Tang's cramped control room. October 24, 1944. Taiwan Strait. Through the steel hull, 180 feet above their heads, a Japanese convoy steamed through the darkness, 13 merchant ships laden with troops and supplies desperately needed to defend the Philippines against MacArthur's advancing forces. What the Japanese convoy commodore didn't know was that below him, in the cold black water, lurked the deadliest submarine in the United States Navy. And what O'Kane didn't know, as he prepared to fire the Tang's last torpedo of her 5th patrol, was that in exactly 90 seconds, his own weapon would circle back and send the most successful American submarine of World War II to the bottom, along with 78 of his crew. By the autumn of 1944, American submarines had transformed from a troubled force plagued by defective torpedoes into the most devastating naval weapon in the Pacific War. While German U-boats captured headlines in the Atlantic, American pig boats, as sailors called them since World War I for their diesel fumes and cramped conditions, were systematically strangling the Japanese Empire. The statistics tell a story that even today seems almost impossible. From Pearl Harbor to VJ Day, 288 American submarines prowled the Pacific. These diesel-electric hunters sank 1,314 Japanese ships totaling 5.3 million tons, more tonnage than all other American forces combined. Submarines accounted for 55% of Japan's merchant marine losses and destroyed 1/3 of the Imperial Japanese Navy's warships, including 1 battleship, 8 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, and 42 destroyers. But 1944 was the year the American submarine campaign reached its terrible crescendo. In approximately 520 war patrols that year, American submarines sent 603 Japanese merchant ships, totaling 2.7 million tons, to the bottom. This exceeded the combined total of the war's first 25 months. The silent service had found its voice, and it was screaming death across the Pacific. The workhorses of this campaign were the Gato-class and Balao-class fleet submarines. Long, sleek predators measuring 311 feet from bow to stern with a beam of 27 feet. These diesel-electric boats displaced 1,526 tons surfaced and 2,424 tons submerged. 4 Fairbanks Morse or General Motors diesel engines drove them at 20 knots on the surface, while 2 electric motors powered by massive battery banks pushed them at 9 knots underwater. Each submarine carried a crew of 80 officers and enlisted men, 10 officers and 70 sailors, crammed into a steel tube that smelled of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, unwashed bodies, and sewage. The boats carried 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward, 4 aft, plus a 5-inch deck gun and various anti-aircraft weapons. They could dive to 400 feet, though many went deeper when Japanese depth charges rained down from above. Life aboard these boats was brutal beyond civilian comprehension. Each crew member had exactly 1 cubic foot of personal storage space. They shared bunks in a practice called hot bunking. When one man went on watch, another climbed into his still warm bunk. 14 men slept in the forward torpedo room alongside 16 torpedoes. The showers doubled as food storage until provisions ran low enough to reclaim the space. Fresh water was strictly rationed. On patrols lasting 60 to 75 days, most men showered perhaps every 10 days. Laundry was impossible. The temperature inside a submerged submarine could reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the engine rooms, with humidity approaching 100%. Mold grew on everything. Cockroaches scuttled through the bilges, impossible to eradicate. When operating within 500 miles of Japanese airfields, which in 1943 meant almost everywhere, submarines stayed submerged during daylight hours and surfaced only at night to run their diesels, charge batteries, and ventilate the boat. Many crews went into reversa, flipping their schedules to treat night as day. This was the world of the pig boats, a suffocating steel coffin that hunted the enemy across thousands of miles of ocean. The transformation of American submarine warfare from cautious to aggressive can be traced to one man and one boat. Lieutenant Commander Dudley Walker, Mush Morton, and USS Wahoo. Morton, a 1930 Naval Academy graduate from Owensboro, Kentucky, earned his nickname Mushmouth at Annapolis for his square jaw and resemblance to a comic strip character. The name stuck, shortened to Mush for the rest of his life. By December 1942, Morton had been given command of Wahoo, a Gatto-class submarine that had completed 2 disappointing patrols under previous command. Before Wahoo's 3rd patrol departed Brisbane, Australia on January 16, 1943, Morton gave a brief but legendary address to his crew. He declared the Wahoo expendable. Any man who wished to remain in Brisbane had 30 minutes to notify the yeoman for a transfer, with no negative consequences. Not one sailor accepted the offer. Morton revolutionized submarine tactics through pure aggression and innovative thinking. Pre-war doctrine emphasized stealthy, submerged torpedo ambushes from safe distances. Morton surfaced at night for superior speed and maneuverability, closed to point-blank range for precise fire, and relentlessly pursued targets despite heavy opposition. His partnership with Executive Officer Richard O'Kane created the most formidable command team in the submarine force. Morton made the unprecedented decision to have O'Kane man the periscope while Morton commanded from the conning tower, free to visualize the entire tactical situation and make dispassionate decisions. Junior Officer George Grider later commented, "Few captains other than Mush ever had such serene faith in a subordinate that they could resist grabbing the scope in moments of crisis." On January 24, 1943, Wahoo penetrated Wewak Harbor on the north coast of New Guinea, the first American submarine to deliberately enter a defended Japanese harbor. Using a cheap school atlas bought in Australia as their only chart of the harbor, Morton navigated into the anchorage and spotted a destroyer with Arrow-class submarines nested around it. From 1,200 yards, dangerously close, Wahoo fired 3 torpedoes at the destroyer. They missed. The destroyer turned toward Wahoo and charged at full speed. Most submarine commanders would have dived and fled. Morton ordered Wahoo to hold steady, aiming directly down the destroyer's throat. At the last possible moment, he fired a single torpedo. It struck the destroyer Harrisame precisely amidships, breaking her in half. Both sections sank within minutes. 2 days later, on January 26, Wahoo encountered a convoy north of New Guinea. Morton spent 14 hours in a running surface battle, attacking again and again. He sank the 5,300-ton troop transport Bio Maru, the 2,000-ton Fouquet Maru, and 2 other vessels totaling another 4,000 tons. Wahoo's 3rd patrol set records that stood for months. Morton returned to Pearl Harbor on February 7, 1943, having sunk 5 ships totaling 31,890 tons. Admiral Chester Nimitz personally came aboard to present awards. Morton received his 2nd Navy Cross. His aggressive tactics became the new doctrine. Over the following months, Wahoo completed 3 more patrols, sinking ship after ship. Morton became so feared by the Japanese that Tokyo reportedly placed a massive bounty on his head. His 5th patrol took Wahoo into the Sea of Japan itself in August 1943, one of the most dangerous assignments possible. He sank 4 ships totaling 13,000 tons. For his 6th and final patrol in September 1943, Morton was ordered to return to the Sea of Japan. Wahoo departed Midway on September 13 and was never heard from again. Post-war analysis of Japanese records revealed that on October 11, 1943, an anti-submarine aircraft spotted a surfaced submarine in La Perouse Strait, Wahoo's planned exit route. The aircraft attacked with 3 depth charges. Wahoo went down with all 79 hands. Dudley Morton was 36 years old. He was posthumously awarded his 4th Navy Cross. In his 5 patrols commanding Wahoo, he had sunk 19 confirmed Japanese ships totaling 55,000 tons, making him one of the top 3 submarine commanders in the Pacific War. But Morton's greatest legacy wasn't tonnage, it was inspiration. His aggressive spirit transformed the entire submarine force, and his star pupil, Richard O'Kane, would take these lessons and become the most successful submarine commander in American history. Lieutenant Commander Richard Hetherington O'Kane received command of the brand-new USS Tang on October 15, 1943 at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California. O'Kane was a 1934 Naval Academy graduate from New Hampshire who had served as Morton's executive officer on Wahoo's first 5 patrols. He had learned from a master, and now he would surpass him. Tang was a Belau-class submarine, slightly improved from the Gatto class with thicker high-tensile steel allowing a test depth of 400 feet instead of 300. She displaced 1,526 tons surfaced and carried the standard armament of 10 torpedo tubes. Her crew numbered 87, 10 officers and 77 enlisted men. Tang's first war patrol began January 22, 1944, operating west of Truk and Saipan in the Caroline Islands Mariana Islands area. On the morning of February 17, Tang's radar detected a convoy of 2 freighters, 5 smaller ships, and their escorts. O'Kane tracked the convoy meticulously, plotting course and speed. Suddenly an escort appeared at 7,000 yards and closing fast. O'Kane ordered Tang deep. 5 depth charges exploded around the submarine, shaking the hull but causing no damage. O'Kane brought Tang back to periscope depth and resumed the attack. At 1,500 yards, he fired a spread of 4 torpedoes. 3 struck the 6,800-ton Jayatan Maru. The freighter sank sternfirst in minutes. 5 days later, during the night of February 22, Tang made a surface attack on a convoy of 3 cargo ships and 4 escorts. Through rain squalls that made radar almost useless, O'Kane tracked the Japanese ships for 30 minutes. At 1,500 yards off the port bow of a freighter, Tang fired 4 torpedoes. They struck the 3,600-ton Fukuyama Maru from bow to stern. The enemy ship disintegrated in a massive explosion. Early the next morning, Tang approached the convoy again. As the escort of the lead ship, the 6,800-ton Yamashimo Maru, moved from its covering position, O'Kane slipped Tang into the gap and fired 4 more torpedoes. The first hit the stern, the second struck just aft of the stack, and the third hit just forward of the bridge, producing a terrific secondary explosion. The ship was twisted, lifted from the water, and began spouting flames as she sank. Tang's first patrol ended with 5 ships sunk, scoring 16 hits out of 24 torpedoes fired, a 67% hit rate that was exceptional for the era. Tang's second patrol in March-April 1944 produced no ship contacts, but O'Kane was assigned lifeguard duty near Truk during carrier strikes by Admiral Halsey's Fast Carrier Task Force. On April 30th and May 1st, Tang rescued 22 downed Navy aviators, setting a record that earned the crew a Presidential Unit Citation. Admiral Halsey personally awarded every member of Tang's crew the Navy Air Medal, an unprecedented honor for submariners. Tang's third patrol into the East China Sea and Yellow Sea from June to July 1944 became one of the most devastating submarine deployments of the entire war. On June 24, southwest of Kagoshima, Japan, Tang's radar detected a convoy of 6 large ships guarded by 16 escorts. O'Kane closed for a surface attack in darkness. He fired a spread of 3 torpedoes at one ship and quickly launched a similar spread at a second target. Massive explosions followed. Post-war Japanese records revealed that 4 ships sank that night, not the 2 O'Kane reported. The torpedo spreads must have overlapped, hitting 2 additional victims beyond their intended target. The ships that went down were the passenger cargo vessels Tamahoko Maru and Tainan Maru, plus the freighters Nasusan Maru and Kenichi Maru, totaling 16,292 tons. Aboard Tamahoko Maru were 565 Allied prisoners of war, 195 of them were Australians who drowned when the ship sank. O'Kane didn't know about the POWs. In the chaos of war, with Japanese ships carrying both military cargo and prisoners, such tragedies were unavoidable. The submarine kept hunting. On June 30th, while patrolling the lane from Kyushu to Dairen, Tang sighted a cargo ship steaming without escort. After making an end-around run on the surface that produced 2 misses, Tang went deep to avoid depth charges, then surfaced and chased the ship until closing to 750 yards. A single torpedo blew the Nikken Maru in half. The next morning, Tang sighted a tanker and a freighter. O'Kane sank the freighter Taian Maru No. 2, but the tanker Takatori Maru No. 1 fled at full speed. Tang trailed until darkness, then fired 2 torpedoes that sent the tanker to the bottom. On July 4, 1944, Tang celebrated Independence Day at dawn with an end-around submerged attack on an enemy freighter near shore. With rapidly shoaling water and her keel about to touch bottom, O'Kane backed off, fired a spread of 3 with 2 hits, then surfaced as survivors of the 6,886-ton cargo ship Asukazen Maru were being rescued by fishing boat. By the end of Tang's third patrol, O'Kane had sunk 10 ships totaling 39,160 tons, more tonnage than any other submarine patrol of the war. Tang returned to Pearl Harbor as a legend. The fourth patrol from July 31 to September 3, 1944 took Tang to Japanese home waters off Honshu. On August 11, O'Kane located 2 enemy freighters and 2 escorts. He launched 3 torpedoes at the larger freighter and 2 at another ship. The larger freighter exploded after 1 torpedo hit her boilers. Tang went deep and endured 38 minutes of depth charges before resurfacing. 2 escorts remained in sight, 1 rescuing survivors. On August 14, Tang sank a Japanese patrol yacht, and 8 days later destroyed a 225-foot patrol boat. On August 23, Tang spotted a large enemy ship with Japanese in white uniforms visible on its superstructure and bridge, clearly a troop transport. Tang fired 3 torpedoes. 2 hit, sending the 8,135-ton transport Tsukushi Maru to her watery grave. The submarine concluded the patrol by sinking an enemy tanker and an escort. Through 4 patrols, Tang had sunk 24 confirmed ships. But her 5th and final patrol would be both her greatest triumph and her ultimate tragedy. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on September 24, 1944 for her 5th war patrol. On September 27, she topped off with fuel at Midway and headed for the area between the northwest coast of Formosa, Taiwan, and the China coast. To reach this hunting ground, Tang had to pass through narrow waters known to be heavily patrolled and mined by the enemy. O'Kane was given the choice of making the passage north of Formosa alone or joining a coordinated attack group under Commander Coy in USS Silverside. O'Kane chose to make the passage alone. No base or submarine ever heard from Tang again after she left Midway, except through the report of her surviving commanding officer. On the night of October 23 to 24, 1944, Tang's radar detected a large convoy off the island of Nushendeo in the northern area of Taiwan Strait. Some transports carried visible crates of aircraft on their deck. This was a critical convoy, rushing reinforcements to the Philippines to oppose MacArthur's invasion of Leyte, which had begun just 3 days earlier on October 20th. O'Kane maneuvered Tang into attack position. At distances ranging from 900 to 1,400 yards, nearly point-blank range for torpedo attacks. He fired 2 torpedoes, each at 2 transports and a tanker. Before those fish had even reached their targets, O'Kane spun Tang around and fired stern torpedoes at another pair of vessels, a transport and a tanker. Explosions erupted across the convoy. Of 11 torpedoes fired, 10 struck their targets. 5 ships began sinking, 3 transports, 2 tankers. An escorting destroyer, either hit by a stray torpedo or destroyed by an exploding tanker nearby, also went to the bottom. The night sea blazed with burning fuel oil. But O'Kane wasn't finished. Through his periscope, he spotted a damaged transport still afloat within attacking distance. Rather than escape, he decided to finish the crippled ship. This was the aggressive spirit Morton had taught him: pursue, attack, destroy. At 0230 hours on October 25, Tang fired her 23rd torpedo of the patrol. O'Kane reported it running hot, straight, and normal, submariner terminology for a perfect shot. For a few seconds all seemed well. Then the torpedo broke the surface, and began to porpoise. Horrified, O'Kane watched as his own weapon curved sharply to the left and started a circular run. He screamed orders. All ahead, emergency! Right full rudder! Tang's engines strained to maximum power. The rudder was thrown hard over. The 311-foot submarine began swinging right. But 2,000 horsepower diesel engines and hydrodynamic forces take time to overcome inertia. The torpedo was faster. The Mark 18 electric torpedo struck Tang's stern at 0235 hours. The explosion was catastrophic. The entire aftersection, the maneuvering room, the engine rooms, the crew's mess, flooded instantly. Men in the control room suffered broken limbs from the violence of the blast. Tang's stern dropped immediately, pulling the submarine down at a steep angle. On the bridge, 9 officers and men were hurled into the sea by the explosion. O'Kane and 4 others survived the initial plunge into the dark water. In the flooded conning tower, 1 officer managed to escape and was later rescued with those from the bridge. Inside the sinking submarine, men crowded forward as the after compartments flooded. Tang came to rest on the bottom at 180 feet. 13 men were trapped in the forward torpedo room. They donned Momsen lungs, primitive breathing devices designed for emergency submarine escape, and blew the ballast tanks to equalize pressure. One by one, they attempted to escape through the torpedo loading hatch, rising through 180 feet of dark water while breathing from the Momsen lungs and fighting the urge to hold their breath as expanding air in their lungs threatened to rupture them. 8 men made it out. Only 4 survived the ascent. The others drowned or succumbed to the bends during the ascent. As dawn broke on October 25th, the 9 Tang survivors floated in the Taiwan Strait, clinging to debris. O'Kane watched Japanese escorts searching for them, rescuing Japanese sailors from the ships Tang had sunk. Finally, a Japanese patrol craft spotted the Americans and fished them out of the water. The Japanese initially beat the survivors, not recognizing them as Americans. When they realized these were the submarine crew that had devastated their convoy, the beatings intensified. But the Tang men were kept alive, valuable intelligence sources. During interrogation at an onshore facility, O'Kane and his men learned the full scope of their final battle. Tang's last patrol had sunk 13 enemy ships. Combined with her 24 confirmed sinks from previous patrols, this brought Tang's total to an unprecedented 33 ships totaling 116,454 tons, the highest-scoring American submarine of World War II for both number of ships and total tonnage. The 9 survivors: Commander Richard O'Kane, Lieutenant Lawrence Savadkin, Lieutenant Junior Grade Hayes Truck, motor machinists mate Clayton Decker, electricians mate William Leibold, fireman Floyd Caverly, seaman Jesse Da Silva, torpedoman's mate Bill Bennett, and gunner's mate Hank Flanagan, were transported to Japan and imprisoned at Amori and Ofuna POW camps. They survived brutal treatment, starvation rations, and interrogations. O'Kane, who had weighed 180 pounds when captured, weighed only 88 pounds when American forces liberated the camp in August 1945. 78 of Tang's crew, including gunners mate First Class James Milton White of Spring Hill, Louisiana, ship's cook Third Class John Andrew Key, who was only 19 years old, and Quartermaster Robert Edward Welch, perished with the submarine. On March 27, 1946, President Harry S. Truman presented the Medal of Honor to Rear Admiral Richard O'Kane on the White House lawn. O'Kane's citation read in part, For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty as commanding officer of the USS Tang operating against two hostile Japanese convoys on October 23 and 24, 1944. While Tang's story captures the heroism and tragedy of individual submarines and crews, the broader campaign these boats waged transformed the Pacific War. In January 1944, when Tang began her first patrol, American submarines had finally overcome the torpedo problems that plagued the war's first 2 years. The Mark 14 torpedo's magnetic exploder had been fixed, its depth-keeping corrected, and its contact exploder strengthened. Suddenly, American torpedoes worked. The results were immediate and devastating. In 1942, American submarines had sunk 134 Japanese ships totaling 580,390 tons. In 1943, that rose to 284 ships totaling 1,341,968 tons. Then came 1944, the year of maximum destruction. In approximately 520 war patrols, American submarines sank 603 Japanese merchant ships totaling 2.7 million tons, plus numerous warships. Japan's merchant marine, which totaled 6.4 million tons in December 1941, was being systematically destroyed. By the end of 1944, remaining Japanese merchant tonnage had fallen to approximately 2 million tons. Barely enough to meet the food supply needs of the home islands, let alone support military operations across the Pacific. The Japanese Navy, which had prioritized offensive operations over defensive convoy escort, scrambled to respond. Regular convoying didn't begin until November 1943, far too late. Japan approved construction of 400 escort frigates, Kaibukan, but completed fewer than half before war's end. These 220-foot vessels, displacing 800 to 1,000 tons with diesel or steam engines, were adequate ocean-going escorts with 16 to 20 knot speed and ranges of 6,000 miles. But they lacked modern radar, effective sonar, and sufficient numbers. Japanese anti-submarine warfare remained primitive throughout the war. Escorts had inadequate communications equipment and only primitive radar detection devices. Depth charges, while numerous, some escorts carried 120, were less effective than American weapons. Most critically, Japanese anti-submarine doctrine was unpredictable and uncoordinated. American submarines exploited these weaknesses ruthlessly. Operating with excellent intelligence from code-breaking, codenamed Magic, American submarine commanders received detailed information on Japanese convoy routes, composition, and schedules. The IJN routinely broadcast convoy locations and intended routes in encoded transmissions. American cryptanalysts decrypted these messages and alerted submarines in the vicinity. Submarine commanders were free to plan their interceptions where conditions were most favorable, usually at night on the surface, where American submarines had superior speed, radar, and fire control. Japanese convoys, sailing at 8 to 10 knots with poorly coordinated escorts, were relatively easy targets for aggressive American submarine commanders operating at 15 to 20 knots on the surface. The human toll was staggering on both sides. American submarines rescued 504 downed airmen during the war, including Lieutenant Junior Grade George H.W. Bush, future 41st President of the United States, who was pulled from the water by USS Finback on September 2, 1944. But American submarines also sent thousands of Japanese soldiers to the bottom in troopship sinkings. Historian Sadi Ikeda estimates 176,000 Japanese military personnel perished in ships sunk from all causes. American submarine attacks accounted for at least 97,342 confirmed deaths, though the actual number was likely much higher. Tragically, American submarines also unknowingly sank ships carrying Allied prisoners of war and slave laborers. 23 ships transporting POWs were sunk by Allied forces in East Asia, with nearly 11,000 POWs and thousands of Indonesian and Javanese Romushas, slave laborers, killed. The sinking of Junyo Maru on September 18, 1944 alone killed over 5,500 men. These tragedies occurred because the Japanese used ordinary merchant ships as both military transports and POW ships, failed to mark them according to Geneva Convention requirements, and rarely informed Allied forces of their presence. American submarine commanders had no way to distinguish a troopship carrying Japanese reinforcements from one carrying Allied POWs. American submarines paid a heavy price for their victories. Of 288 submarines that saw service in the Pacific, 52 were lost to enemy action, accidents, or unknown causes. This represents an 18% loss rate, the highest of any branch of the American military in World War II. These losses claimed 3,505 American submariners. For comparison, the entire submarine force numbered only about 16,000 men at its peak. Submarines represented less than 2% of the U.S. Navy, but suffered approximately 20% of naval casualties. The silent service earned its reputation through blood and steel. Presidential unit citations were awarded 36 times to submarine crews. 7 submarine skippers received the Medal of Honor. Submarines earned more Navy Crosses, Silver Stars, and other decorations per capita than any other naval service. Living conditions aboard these boats, the diesel fumes, the heat, the smell, the constant danger of depth charges or circular running torpedoes, tested men beyond normal endurance. Clayton Decker, one of Tang's 9 survivors, recalled, "The one thing I always heard about the Navy was that your bunk and the chow hall went right along with you. But submarine chow, despite being the best in the Navy, couldn't compensate for living in what many called sewer pipes that occasionally submerge." The psychological strain was immense. Every time a submarine dove, the crew knew that one depth charge in the wrong place, one flooded compartment, one jammed diving plane could mean death for all 80 men aboard. There were no survivors when a submerged submarine was destroyed. You went down with all hands to eternal patrol, as the submarine service memorialized its lost boats. Yet volunteers for submarine duty never wavered. The submarine service maintained its volunteers-only policy throughout the war. Men requested submarine duty knowing the risks, drawn by the aggressive spirit, the elite nature of the service, and the chance to take the war directly to the enemy. By August 1945, when Japan surrendered, American submarines had accomplished what no other force could claim. They had destroyed an empire's economic foundation. Japan's merchant marine had been reduced to less than 25% of its December 1941 tonnage. Oil imports, which Japan desperately needed from Southeast Asia, had been cut to a trickle. By late 1944, the combined fleet had relocated from Truk to Singapore specifically to be closer to Balikpapan's oil supplies, a move forced by the unsustainable losses of tankers to American submarines. Food imports to the home islands had fallen catastrophically. By 1945, Japan was rationing rice at near-starvation levels. Industrial production, dependent on raw materials from occupied territories, collapsed. Iron ore, bauxite, rubber, tin, all the resources that had driven Japan's southward expansion in 1941 to 1942, could no longer reach Japanese factories. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once the world's third most powerful fleet, had been reduced to irrelevance partly through submarine attacks on warships, but primarily through destruction of the fuel tankers needed to operate those warships. Japanese carriers sat in port, useless without fuel. Battleships and cruisers were relegated to suicide missions or training duty. The submarine campaign against Japanese shipping was, as one historian noted, the single most decisive factor in the collapse of the Japanese economy. Yet this achievement receives far less attention than the island-hopping campaigns, the carrier battles, or the B-29 firebombing offensive. The submarine war was silent, waged far from cameras and reporters, by a tiny fraction of the naval service operating in secrecy. American submariners sank more enemy tonnage than all other American forces combined: aircraft, surface ships, and mines, yet their contribution is often footnoted in popular histories. Today, several World War II submarines survive as museum ships, offering visitors a glimpse into this brutal world. USS Bowfin in Pearl Harbor, USS Cavalla in Galveston, USS Cobia in Wisconsin, USS Drum in Alabama, USS Lionfish in Massachusetts, USS Pampanito in San Francisco, and USS Silversides in Michigan all welcome visitors to walk through their cramped compartments and imagine what it was like. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans features Final Mission, the USS Tang Submarine Experience, an interactive exhibit where visitors man stations aboard a recreation of Tang during her final patrol. Each visitor receives a card corresponding to one of the 87 crew members and learns whether their sailor survived or perished when Tang went down. These memorials serve a vital purpose, ensuring that future generations understand what the silent service accomplished and what it cost. Richard O'Kane retired from the Navy as a Rear Admiral in 1957. He spent his retirement years ensuring Tang and her crew received proper recognition. He advocated successfully for recalculating Tang's confirmed sinkings using post-war Japanese records, which raised her total from the initially credited 24 ships to 33 ships totaling 116,454 tons, firmly establishing Tang as the most successful American submarine of the war. O'Kane died on February 16, 1994, at age 83. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. The guided missile destroyer USS O'Kane, DDG-77, commissioned in 1999, bears his name and continues his legacy. The 78 men who died aboard Tang remain on eternal patrol, entombed in their submarine 180 feet below the Taiwan Strait. USS Tang was never decommissioned. Like all American submarines lost at sea, she remains on active duty in perpetuity, her crew standing eternal watch in the cold, dark water where they fell. Dudley Morton, who transformed submarine warfare from cautious to aggressive, has no known grave. USS Wahoo lies somewhere in La Perouse Strait, depth and exact location unknown. The destroyer USS Morton, DD-948, commissioned in 1959, honored his memory until her decommissioning in 1992. The 52 American submarines lost during World War II are commemorated at the Submarine Force Library and Museum in Groton, Connecticut, where a memorial lists every boat and every man lost. Their sacrifice enabled the silent service to achieve what seemed impossible in December 1941. The systematic destruction of an empire's naval and economic power through the aggressive use of submarines. The pig boats, smelly, cramped, dangerous, and uncomfortable, proved to be among the most effective weapons of World War II. The men who volunteered to serve aboard them, knowing the odds and accepting the risks, deserve recognition as among the war's greatest unsung heroes. They hunted in waters thousands of miles from home, operating alone or in small wolf packs, facing depth charges, mines, and aircraft with only their skill, courage, and torpedoes for defense. In the end, these submariners brought an empire to its knees, not through dramatic battles or massive invasions, but through the patient, systematic, relentless destruction of merchant shipping, tanker by tanker, freighter by freighter, convoy by convoy, until Japan could no longer feed its people, fuel its ships, or supply its armies. This was the achievement of the pig boats and the men who sailed them. This was America's submarine terror in the Pacific, 1944 to 1945. If you enjoyed this story of courage, sacrifice, and the silent warriors who changed the course of history, make sure to like and subscribe for more untold military history from the 20th century.